Hello, everyone. As always, I'm Alicia Galambos, and I'm the director and founder here at EAG Innovation. Today, we have another interview episode with our special guest, Kristina Campos, who's here to talk to us all about teenage depression, anxiety, and drug abuse. Kristina, I'd love for you to just take a moment to introduce yourself to the audience and share with them a little bit about what you do.
Thank you very much for having me on. And yeah, I founded The Impactful Parent, and basically that is just a platform. It's completely free online where I provide parents advice and tips and free resources and try to build a community where parents of school-age children can come to a place and ask questions and just, get those tips that we need. Because when your kids get older into those tween and teen years, man, the game changes again in parenting, and there's, in my opinion, just not enough of support. And so that's what I'm trying to create for parents, is support to help them through those. Could be rough years. They also could be really great years, depending on how much you prepare for them. So yeah.
Yeah, I really like the idea surrounding early intervention, and that's what I'm about in my practice as well. And I'm wondering how you've been seeing early intervention come up during the case of the pandemic at all.
Yeah, so a lot of what I'll be talking about today, is our teens have, all our children, but especially our teens, have really taken the pandemic very hard because the pandemic, it just derailed children from their routine, and children thrive off routine. Routine creates security. It creates that sense of self that especially teenagers that are, trying to developmentally appropriately separate from their parents and become their own identity and their own person. Now they are completely in an unpredictable world. And so it's been really, really difficult. But I will say that, like, a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, it's so helpful if you have an 8, 9, 10, 11-year old. These are things that I want those parents to really listen to, because the more you can prepare yourself before any of these really mountains come your way, then the mountains become smaller. They're more like hills. And so it's just about preparing yourself, parents. Prepare. And then it just makes those roads so much easier.
Yeah, I think something I'm hearing a lot is parents wanting to make a connection with their tween, as we'll kind of call that age.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for parents who are watching this thinking, I'd like to make a connection, but I'm not entirely sure how.
Oh, sure. I have tons of suggestions. Let me think about it. I'll just narrow it down to a couple. You know, with the tween years, it really is important to take time out of your day to spend some quality time with them. I feel like when your children are babies, you spend all this time doting over them and taking them to certain places and going to the zoo, and then they get into that 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old range, and it's kind of the sweet spot of parenting where
Mhm.
they're not in their teen years yet, where they're trying to create their own and and push the boundaries, and at the same time they're not babies, so they're pretty self-sufficient. And I'll be honest with you, I see parents, they relax in this time period and they kind of take a breath because they need the rest, and there's a lot of missed opportunity to create those bonds that are really, really needed for the teen years, so that your teen can come to you and feel comfortable. And you have to create those in that 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old range. That's really when it starts. And that would be my suggestion number one, is don't get lax. Really make the time to have those connections in those times, a quality time. Put down the screens, go camping, go do something outside or whatever, like just interact, play the board game, and really have those personal relationships during that time.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy in terms of building some of those relationships earlier on, because when it comes to the time as teenagers where they may be struggling in finding their own identity and coming into their own, how, if we haven't had some of these relationships or that time or experience to bond, or even if we have and our teenagers now struggling with anxiety, for example, or depression, what are some of the suggestions you would give to parents who are actively going through that with their teen right now?
So I want to start by saying that even if you have even a younger child, it doesn't really matter. A lot, any age across the board, when you see a behavior in your child, you have to remember that you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. So what I mean by that is a lot of psychologists use this analogy and like just a vision that when you have an iceberg on top of the water, you see just the tip of the iceberg. And that is manifests itself usually in like anger or anxiety. And we only, a lot of mistakes that parents make is we only address the issue of the tip of the iceberg when really underneath those behaviors, that emotion is actually a representation of so many other things happening underneath the water. So it's usually stems from fear. I'm afraid of something. I'm not feeling secure about something. I'm worried, or I don't feel like I have control of something. And those are the feelings that bring out the tip of the iceberg, the anger or the anxiety. So my first suggestion is if you start to see a shift in your child's behavior, you need to put on your investigator hat, and you really got to start looking for, where is this coming from? And that's the mistake that most parents make. They see the kid getting up in their face, yelling at them, and they want to address the issue and say, I'm going to take away your iPod and you can't do this to me. You're acting disrespectful. And they give them a consequence for their action, but they're never really addressing the real issue, which is, why do you feel so angry? Why are you feeling so insecure? What's happening in your world that makes you need to act this way? Because people do act from our emotions. And that's, you really have to put on that investigator hat and figure out what's going on. So that is really, really step one.
I think for parents who are looking to investigate and are maybe trying to approach that line of questioning with their teenagers and are getting avoidance or aren't getting a response, what would you suggest in that moment that they do to have that conversation, to investigate a bit more?
Yeah, so this is when you need to become a listener. And it's really hard to become a listener when you have a teenager that doesn't want to talk, right?
Mm.
So, but it's about you winning that battle, because in general, kids will test those boundaries. It's really a sad kind of epidemic that everybody, not just teenagers, we tend to be the meanest to the people we love the most, because we feel secure to have our true feelings come out to those people. And that's what parents are. We're supposed to be an unconditional love that is supposed to be willing to love them through thick and thin. And our kids will test us through that. So we need to win that battle and show them that, yes, I will not give up on you. Yes, I will sit here and ask you every single day what's going on. And I will come into your room and I will check on you. And I'm not going to stop. And so it's about that when you have a child that's really struggling. But there are some certain signs that you can look for. I mean, you can look for appetite changes. You can looking for sleeping too much and sleeping too little. Those are signs that something is happening. You can look for radical changes in their energy levels. You can look for grades that are dropping or trouble concentrating. The difficulty with all of this is that the signs of depression and the signs of drug use are really similar, and they overlap huge. So, don't go right away like, oh, I think my kid might be doing drugs. I mean, could they be? Yeah, but you don't want to jump to those conclusions. You just mainly want to look at those signs and say, where is this coming from? I see some things that are really unusual, and then start opening up the conversation. And it's about creating bonds with your teenager, where I try to help parents through the Impactful Parent. Like we do 30-day challenges, for example. They're absolutely free, to get parents to talk to their kids of any age with different questions, because the same old, how was your day? Do you have homework today? Those are boring. Kids don't want to hear that. That's repetitive. Like, it's not interesting at all. Like, and that's when kids shut down. They're like, okay, really, that's all you care about? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, parents care about if their kids have homework, but if that's the only question you're asking them, then that's not stimulating to them at all. So like with our 30-day challenges, I give parents a new question to ask their teen or younger child every single day so that it prompts a new kind of conversation. And it's through those small, very small little efforts that parents can make that will, in the long run, make a big difference, because parenting is a long game. It's not a short game, it's a long game. So you're not playing for the immediate gratification. You're really playing for the big picture. And that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck. We get stuck in that, I'm just going to punish you for this one little thing that you did today, when really we need to be looking at the much bigger issue happening at hand.
Yeah, it sounds like the question and the process that you've come up with is validating for both the parents and the teen, and seems almost like a way to reduce some of that anger, because of course it's frustrating for a teenager who's been asked the same question and it's not relevant or resonating to them in their lives. And something you did mention as well was it's so hard to tell the difference between depression and drug use. And as you were speaking, I also thought it might be hard for a parent to tell the difference between what might be a mental health issue versus a physical health issue too. And I'm wondering if you can talk more to that as to how a parent might get to the bottom as to whether it's a mental health issue that's going on, or is my child using drugs because of wanting to release the pain or wanting to gain control over an aspect of their lives in their teenagehood.
And you just hit that nail on the head right there. The drug is a coping mechanism. It's not the cause of the depression or the anxiety. It is a coping mechanism. So you need to look at it in that direction also. Yeah, are the signs similar and overlapping? Yeah, because one brings on the other. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I'll clarify for your audience so that they can really kind of maybe separate the two.
Mm-hmm.
With drugs, um, you know, the warning signs you're looking for, you can do some of the really obvious warning signs like smell of marijuana, but there's other much more subtle ones like bloody noses, soot, that's a black soot, that's actually a sign of drug use. Your child being jittery and agitated. If they're super dehydrated all the time, it seems like that could be a sign of drug use. Constipation is a huge sign of drug use, and a lot of parents don't know that. Vomiting. The difference then to depression will be the actual suicidal thoughts. Are they thinking about it? Do they have a preoccupation with death? Are they being super, super aggressive? Sometimes that's a sign. Are they withdrawing, for that matter? Are they starting to give away their possessions? That's really scary, but it could be a sign of massive fatigue. So again, like you can see how that's really hard to differentiate. But if you can discover whether or not your child is doing drugs, then my first thing to parents is do not freak out. And that's super huge, because your child doesn't want to feel like this, whether they're using drugs because they are depressed or anxious, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to feel that way. And you have to remember that they're not trying to do drugs to spite you. They're doing drugs because they don't know what else to do and how else to cope. And if you remember that and come into it with a, oh my goodness, I didn't know you were in such a bad place, let me help you stance, instead of what the, and yelling, it comes from your child goes from either defensive mode, like, oh no, I'm going to get in trouble, what are you going to do to me now, to, what, you mean you can help me? I need help me. It's night and day, because the type of drug that they use will also indicate what kind of issues they're dealing with. All people typically take drugs for 3 reasons. Okay, the first one was either they're trying to get away from something and hide. Okay, so the
Yep.
type of drug that they might be using in that kind of case might be marijuana, or well, there's several other drugs that make you run and hide, like just kind of let you
Yep.
go inside yourself. Another reason would be to give you enough energy that you can keep going. And I see this a lot that parents overlook. So this is a very popular in perfectionist kind of children who like need to do better, want to get the straight A. I need to do more. I need to do more. I'm going to stay up all night long and study. Those kinds of personalities will also take drugs to help them keep going. And that kind of drug would be something like cocaine. And then your third reason would be just experimental. Now, can you use drugs experimentally and get addicted? Absolutely. But the likelihood is a lot less than the other two. So you're really looking for, okay, I'm not going to freak out. Now tell me what drug are you using? And just that alone, not asking them why, because they probably may not even want to talk to you about it. I mean, you could ask, but
Yep.
don't expect an answer. But just knowing what type of drug they're using will also tell you a little bit about why they're using it. How does that drug make you feel? Because if that drug, that's going to be what they're seeking. How does the drug
Mm.
make that person feel? Is it withdrawal or is it energy?
Yeah. I think that's a very valid point because it gives parents a lot to work with based on the little information that they're able to gather, especially if their teenager isn't feeling ready or comfortable enough to share more than the substance that they're using. And I'm wondering how parents can tell as to whether this is an addictive behavior for their teen, or is it just something they're using experimentally? Because, for example, if a teenager is using marijuana experimentally versus they're taking it to get out of themselves a bit more, which obviously has higher risk in creating that addictive factor, I'm wondering how parents are able to tell based on the kind of words the teenager will use to describe their experiences without um, without having to probe or blame or shame their teen.
Yeah, and that's going to be a tricky and very slippery slope. However, the first thing I would look at with that is when and where and who are they doing it with? Because that will tell you if they're doing drugs alone in their room, it's not a social thing. That's for seeking a particular type of feeling that they need to have in that moment. Versus if they're doing drugs solely with friends, then it becomes social and maybe it's more of a peer pressure thing. So you ask those who, that when questions, which are much easier for a child to answer than why, because they may
Exactly.
not know why themselves. We do lots of things as humans that we don't know why we do them. So,
Yep.
asking them why would be a parent's first instinct, but it's not necessarily the best question yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I say yet because eventually you do want to get there, but asking a person why that doesn't even know why isn't going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at as well. It's sometimes that why question that we instinctively want to go into isn't always the best to avoid either a reactive response or more frustration or even less answers because sometimes when we ask why, it can feel as though we are blaming or creating a response that isn't feeling validating to the teenager, especially when their brains are still developing and they're still learning how to regulate and be in control of their own emotions as they begin to separate from their parents as being their baseline. And I'm
Very well
wondering,
said.
thank you. And I'm wondering what if you're at the point where your teenager has agreed to seek support, how can you help parents through that process? Because I know it's a challenging time to find someone who is going to be there to support your teenager, is also going to be there to support the family as a whole as they're working through the situation. So, what kind of tips would you give folks to look for in a provider or a practitioner?
So, you do want to look for a connection. And I will tell you right now, it's hard sometimes to find that connection with a practitioner. So be ready for changing over and over, maybe 3, 4 times, maybe possibly more, before your child feels comfortable with somebody that they are willing to talk with. And you don't know who that kind of person will be. I think a lot of mistakes that parents might make is they just pick somebody on the insurance policy and they go with that. And I think that's a good start, actually. I'm not saying don't pick somebody outside of insurance policy, because I know money's an issue and I wish it wasn't, but it is, because you want to give your child support, but we got to do it through ways that are easier for us as adults. But do not get frustrated with your child when it's been a month and they've seen this person 4 or more times and there hasn't been a lot of progress. You ask your child and give them the opportunity to say, look, now you've been with that person long enough. How is that going for you? Do you want to change? And give them the out. And yeah, could you be starting all over again? You could be with a whole new practitioner. But until you find that right person, you're not going to make any progress anyway. So let your child have the out. Let them have a say in who they see and who they talk to, instead of dictating it, which is
Yep.
really the parental instinct. Hey, you don't know how to control yourself and your choices, so I'm going to do it for you. And that comes from a place of love. You're just trying to help your kid. I get it. But you got to step back and say, and really allow them. One of my favorite things to tell parents, and this is super hard, is you may have given a life, but it is not your life to live. And that's the essence of parenting. We some point we must let go and let our child live their own life. And it's so hard when they're teenagers and they're making all the wrong choices. And so it's like, you just want to strangle them. But you got to step back and say, I will be there. I will guide you. I will make my suggestions. I'm going to support you along the way. I'm never going to give up on you. But in the end, it's not my life to live.
Yeah.
And give them those choices, even though you don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's so important in terms of how even allowing your teenager to sit with you while you make that search and you look at some of the individuals on your insurance policy. It's now really great because a lot more therapists and practitioners are creating really in-depth websites. They're doing podcasts like this or Instagram lives and showing some of the things that they're doing within their practice. And I think that's such a great way to give your teenager some advocacy even before they start. And just like what you were saying, giving them advocacy throughout the process, that they know they have an out and they know that they have the opportunity to find someone who is a good fit and can support them. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if parents are listening to this and they're hearing you speak and think that you'd be a great fit, or they're interested in some of your 30-day challenges, like the one that you were talking about earlier on in the episode. How can they find you and how can they get some of your support?
Yeah, so I offer a behavior management program for kids that are suffering from anxiety or anger management, where I help parents. It's a completely online course, but I help parents create those conversations with their kids and really get down to the meaning of the whole iceberg effect that I was talking about earlier. You might see this, but where is this all coming from? And then again, I'm working with the parents, but it's teaching the parents how to work with their children to show them how to cope in more appropriate ways, not using drugs and alcohol. And how to change their thought patterns so that they don't spiral into these abyss of emotions. And it's really an amazing program. It's good for all school age children, age 8 to 18. I will say the sweet spot for that is still that tween years, because the earlier you can catch it, and the better off you will be as a parent. Can a teenager parent use it? Absolutely. I do the same exact methods with my own 4 children, because I am a single mom of 4 kids myself. So I use these same methods with my teenagers, but it's easier when you can do it with an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, because while they're not quite as oppositional, right? Because they're not
Mhm.
teenagers quite yet. So it's a little bit easier that way, but it still works. Another program I offer is a drug program and I make it the price so low, you guys. It's for less than you'll have lunch today. I walk you through how to see signs of drugs, and I go through 18 different types of drugs and how to look for drugs, and so that you can have peace of mind that it's not to catch your kids. It's to have peace of mind that maybe they're not there yet, or that they're not doing drugs, to catch it early if it comes to that. But or to educate yourself early. Again, the earlier you can educate yourself, the better off you're going to be. And so that program I also offer, and it's great. I mean, trying to help parents as much I can. But the Impactful Parent in general has so much content. I just give free stuff away to parents, because that's my mission, is just mainly to help them. So, a free checklist for drugs is how I even start that program. And I have another free resource. It's called 20 Ways to Cope. And if you go to https://theimpactfulparent.com/20 ways to cope, it's a free PDF of 20 different coping mechanisms that you can offer to your child, so that they don't have to rely on drugs and alcohol if they're feeling angry and have so many emotions that they just don't know how to control.
Yeah.
Always giving away free stuff to parents, because it's just super important.
Yeah, we absolutely agree. And that's exactly what our aim is to do with this podcast. So thank you so much for making an impact and showing up for teens and their parents in such a big way. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for who is listening. You can always like and subscribe here on YouTube. As always, don't forget we have episodes every Saturday and Tuesday released at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on so many topics in regards to mental health, families, and even providing a safer space for providers to learn and grow. Thank you so much, everyone.